Right, well, here's a quick exercise. I wanted to show you how to do something like some stormy waters. Actually, not this style. This really I can't do. I mean, you need talent to paint this. This one here, same thing. These were done by Attila Koll, a great illustrator in Hungary. What I'd like to do is show you something like this here. This water is kind of rough waters, it's sunset, and so let's have a look at how to do this. There's basically two parts to the water. There are some big waves and there are some tiny little disturbances, and so we need to combine them both together. Alright, let's get started. First thing we'll need to do is create some sort of a top-down look on that water. We could use, for instance, the render plasma noise, or perhaps some other patterns to render that are somewhat repetitive. Might be something like the cellular patterns. Let's start with the bumpy toy. Alright, the bumpy toy, and let's render some of the parameters here. Let's see the scale. Let's make it pretty big there. And self-displace it. Some of these will look a little bit better in self-displacement than others. And we could probably just use this one for starters. Okay, that. Now, if we wanted some bigger waves, some bigger features, even bigger than these, right? I mean, you see the big, fairly big, turbulent parts there. One thing you could do is smooth it, perhaps first expand the dynamic range so you get more contrast from the darker to the brighter parts, and then also smooth it a little bit. So, or blur it. If you blur it, for instance, with the Gaussian blur, what happens then, some of the small details go away and you could end up getting just a very few large features. And then once you have those, you can go back again into some more expanding the dynamic range, perhaps increasing some other contrast or gamma. I mean, you can do adjust the value there and get a little bit more pronounced patterns on those different bright or dark spots. Okay, so these, imagine this as sort of an elevation map. Some parts the waves go down, some parts the waves go up, and it kind of creates a pattern of that sort. Now on top of that we need some tiny little fine disturbances, and so we'll create another one. Perhaps we'll take a snapshot of this one here. It's always good to keep those really handy. Those we don't need anymore. Let's go get rid of those. Remember, they're not in a save to file, it's just in memory. So if you were to have a power outage or something like that, that would not be really good, it wouldn't be saved. But we can quickly use that now to perhaps render another one. And what we could render this time perhaps is something like the plasma noise, where we have control over the size for tiny little disturbances or some bigger ones. Something like this might be kind of handy. Alright, let's use this. And what we really want to do is combine them both together. So let's grab a snapshot of that as well. And understand we have this one, the big features, and we have this one, the tiny little features. And one way to combine them both together is, of course, over layers. You could open up a new layer here. And so you have the first layer. Oh, we don't see it here. Let's scroll that up. There you go. Let's make the layers a little bit bigger. Jumbo thumbnails. There you go. So we got one layer down here with the small details, and then we go to the top one and put the big ones. And so you'll see it get darker. That depends on how you combine the layers. It could be a screen layer combination. You could also change the opacity or the intensity of that. So there's a variety of ways to work with that at the layers level. Another way that you could do that is that you keep one image in the main buffer and then just switch to the swap buffer, right? And then combine the two together. So let's first switch to the swap buffer. Remember, there's a shortcut J for jumping to that, or swap the buffers right there. Right now it's plain blank, so click on this one here and we'll put this big image, this big features into that one. And so now we have them both together and we can merge them, or rather at least view them both at the same time. And then if you like that, you can right click and perhaps select something like merging them with swap, or first change it to a different style like the screen mode or additive mode, subtractive mode. There's a variety of different effects that will come out of that. Here's one that's really interesting if you're doing all sorts of patterns that are designs for something like marble textures with some irregular patterns in some areas. This is great also for space art, by the way, when you throw some color gradients on it. But let's go back to our style here. What I'll use, I'll just use a plain multiply mode. So we do have some areas that are darker and some areas that are brighter. Let's go merge these together, and then perhaps we can fine-tune it a little bit and say, well, we had this initially and then we got to this, and we didn't want it really that much dominant on the small little features, so we can fade it. This is the interactive undo or fade last action. Let's give it something like this. So we'll still see the big waves quite a bit, and then some tiny little disturbances all over that as well. Alright, so with that in mind, let's go capture that. Store this as well. And we probably don't need these others anymore. Let's go minimize those. And so at this time, what I'm going to do eventually with this, by the way, is I'm going to use our lighting tool here, the lighting tool, so that we can put some sort of a light source over it, and it will look like it's water that's reflecting it. The light source, the sun, for instance, but it will be in a perspective view, so we'll need to move it down into a perspective projection. If we did that right now, it wouldn't look quite perfect, because check this out. If we go to transform 3D perspective, well, we would see the pattern, you know, the edge of this. See how the edge is showing here. If we don't do the repeating of the pattern, you see that. That's, by the way, a feature that's not released yet. That's in the making for an upcoming patch. The ability of disabling the repeat pattern there. But anyway, we need to make sure that it is seamless here at this point. So let's go to the brush tool and use the selection, which is the current image altogether, as a brush. And you might ask why? Well, because we have a tool down here that we'll use after that called Make Seamless. We could actually go straight there as well, but it will tell us we don't have a custom brush yet. So this is just kind of a step in between as a workaround, because this tool is in the brush menu. So let's go grab the whole thing as a brush. We see it here now. And we can store it, although there's really no need for that, because we're not going to do much work on that, other than let's go here and resample, excuse me, make it seamless. Okay, and you can of course adjust a little bit how big that transitional region is where the seams are being overlapping for the tiling, and we can say we want to use the buffer and then keep it at the current size. Okay, that, place it in there. So now we have a tile that can be tiled, that can be repeated, and it's seamless. One thing I'll do, of course, at this point is store this image again. Alright, so now if I use the transform perspective tool, now I know that it's not going to show the seam. Now it might still show a little bit of a pattern. You can see how it's going into a perspective Q here and a Q here, so you can see the line up there. And in order to perhaps mitigate that a little bit, what I would actually do is rotate the whole thing. Let me go to the transform, and there is transform tool, right? And if I make it a little bit smaller and rotate it, and then also tile it, and you can't see any seam because we just made it seamless, you may be able to perhaps avoid some of that repetitive pattern showing. It's not really always easy, because there is, after all, a pattern. You know, it is a shape of a limited dimension, and you will eventually see it repeat. You won't see a sharp edge seam anymore, but you will still see a pattern that kind of repeats. It's probably good enough here at this point, so let's go and use our perspective transform. And there it is. And go like that. Oh no, look at that. I actually do have, oh yeah, I after this rotation I probably do need to make it what we just did earlier, which is to make it seamless again. So let's grab it into the brush, make it seamless, been there, done that. There you go. Keep it, done. Okay, and so now this time we'll store this image again. And we got two different choices now, this one or this one. Let's use that, and this time we can go and perspective rotate it. Okay, so, well, yeah, it still has a little bit of a pattern there, but we'll see that go away pretty soon. And that's when we actually apply some sort of lighting effect on it. So the trick now is to get it to show the horizon And it doesn't have to be this one here, by the way. We could quite easily add a horizon later on and overlap it, maybe with a fog that fades it away. So you know, you can certainly trim it down even more if you want. Bend it down to, you know, to like this, but that puts a lot of distortion in the front there with the perspective. I would go with something like this. Let's try something like that. Okay, that. Alright, so now let's apply the lighting effect just to get an idea of where we're heading with this. Again, let's store this image for the time being. Probably don't need these anymore. Always good idea to save them on file though before you dismiss them. But I want to give you an idea of what we'll be doing there with the Stylize, the lighting tool. That's the one that's going to make it look like the sun is shining over that. Now, in order to make it really look like the sun, one thing we'll need to do is perhaps give it some color. And so we can give it a little bit of a reddish tint for the sunset. Right? And that will be on the rotation there, on the light source. We also want the light source to reflect on the ground, so we'll bring it really close to the water. Okay, and not too bright, something like that. Alright, now there's also another thing you might want to do sometimes, and change the smoothness. If you go all the way here, you'll see only very big waves, and if you go down here, you'll see the tiny little fine details as well. So that's some of the capabilities we have here. We also have this, the texture intensity, that reduces how much that texture actually shows. And that's actually something I would use over a different light source. So this one here, I would go like that, and then I'll add another light source. This one is going to be a bluish light source that we'll place above, and we make a pretty bright impression on that, but it's going to be a dark blue, so we essentially get something like a skylight effect, skylighting, you know, the whole sky is shining on the entire scenery, something like that. Right. Now in this preview we see the dominance only of the one current light source. The other one is already there, but we see it only in the main view. So that's actually done intentionally so that you can really see what is this light doing by itself, because it is going in its own layer. When you look over here, it's actually created another layer. So we have one layer with the reddish and the reflection there, and then we got the other one with the blue part, and we can turn one invisible or the other. Of course, these are not opaque layers, so it's an additive mode. In this case, it could be a multiplicative mode. Multiply, that would look kind of more metallic. So there's a variety of effects you can get with that. There's a screen mode, bright daylight. We probably would be better off staying at additive mode here and reducing the intensity a little bit.